So I think today I'm going to continue with the Handbook for Mankind by Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. I had been giving some instruction around that particular practice. Um, what I like about, we'll be talking about kind of grasping and clinging, the crux of the issue, so to speak. Tonight, I'm thinking about, going through maybe briefly, maybe reading a little bit about what Buddhadasa Bhikkhu has to say about grasping and clinging, and some of the things that he points out that we grasp and cling to as found in Buddhism. It's a little bit of we'll get to that in a minute. Let's practice, let's sit, let's enjoy some time together. So welcome, thank you all for attending. Yeah, so we'll just settle in. We're just going to sit for a while. We'll give it about a 30-minute sit. Give some guidance. Is there anyone here that's new to this group or new to Against the Stream that would like to introduce themselves? All right. Well, welcome to all of you. Somebody, looks like Rachel said, I love Ward. He's amazing. He was a counselor. That's great. Yeah, he's good people. I like him a lot. It's nice to have peers, it's nice to have Sangha where we can, teach together, practice together, feel connection. It's really important. All right. So we'll sit for 30 minutes or so and just finding a posture that's workable, that's sustainable, one where you can be relaxed and alert. I think today we're going to work with the body scan. So working kind of through the body scan, I'll use an elemental practice and then move into the kind of scanning through. So there'll be maybe a little bit more guidance than normal, but I'm sure you guys can follow along. So it's helpful if you allow the eyes to close or be downcast. Sometimes even with a body scan, lying down can be helpful if you don't feel tired or sleepy. I'm just settling in. Perhaps taking a moment to bring in some gratitude for yourself, for coming to this group, for showing up for this practice. Allowing yourself this opportunity to look within. So it's useful to connect to this experience of breathing. Whatever way feels easiest to connect to, whether it's the tip of the nose or the expansion and contraction of the chest or the rise and fall of the belly, just coming into contact with this experience of breathing. Breathing in. Know that you're breathing in. Breathing out. Know that you're breathing out. Of course, the mind may be busy or pulling the attention. It's not a problem. Just recognizing, thinking, perhaps silently noting, thinking, future or past. And then aim the attention back to this experience of breathing, allowing this to be an anchor or a resting place to come back to. So, in utilizing a body scan or a body awareness practice, whenever we feel distracted or perhaps the attention wanders off, you can utilize the breath as an entry point back into the body, connecting back to the breath, to the anchor, and then waiting for the next kind of instruction for the body parts. So the idea here is to aim the attention towards like the left foot and the right foot, bringing your awareness, immersing your attention into each body part as we scan through. Left foot, right foot. Feeling the different sensations, cold or warm, contact with the floor, the chair, the cushion. Skin and muscles, bones. What's present here in the left foot and the right foot? Noticing if there's any particular sensations, vibration or tingling or whatever's present there. And then in some way, expanding the awareness up into the ankles and the shins and the calves. Again, bringing awareness to the muscles and bones, connective tissue, skin. What makes up this body? As we scan through the shins and the calves, is there stories associated with this body part? Memories. And seeing if we can be aware of what arises. If there's any tension, can we soften? Can we relax? If there's any story, can we bring awareness without getting lost in the story, seeing it like clouds in the sky, thoughts in the mind. Continuing the awareness up into the knees, the connective tissue, tendons, the kneecap, or the thighs, left thigh, right thigh. Again, the bones, the muscles, skin, perhaps body hair, any sensations that are present. Moving up into the hips, this connection between the lower body and the upper body, the systems of reproduction, of filtration. Noticing the pelvis, the hip girdle, the joint of the leg, moving into the hips. Any sensations present here? Scanning with our attention, our awareness, into the low back, the spine, both the contents and the container of this body. Lower abdomen, base of the spine, the organs. Again, systems of filtration, digestion, visualizing a particular organ in the abdomen, maybe the spleen or the kidneys, the liver. Noticing any places of holding. Can we soften? Moving the awareness now up the spine, one vertebra at a time. Scanning through to the upper abdomen, the diaphragm, separating the lower abdomen to the upper kind of chest area. One vertebra at a time. Feeling the expansion and contraction of the diaphragm, the lungs, the chest, the ribs. The ribs, flexible and strong, supportive and accommodating. the lungs themselves expanding and contracting. The heart beating oxygenated blood working together with the lungs. Noticing any sensations here. Moving the awareness up the chest, back around to the shoulder blades, the shoulders. What's present here? Connection to the left shoulder and the right shoulder, the bones, connective tissue, muscles, tendons, skin. Perhaps the feeling of clothing or atmosphere on the skin. Moving down into the left arm and the right arm. The bones of the arms, down to the elbows, muscles, tendons, down to the forearms, the hands, out into the fingers, the palms, top of the hands, places of contact. Sensations in the left hand and the right hand, warmth, cold, wet, dry. Moving the awareness back up through the wrists and the arms and the shoulders to the collarbone, to the throat, back of the neck, circles of awareness now, moving up from the throat, and the neck, the spine, feeling where the spinal cord, central nervous system, connects with the brain. Awareness of the jaw, back of the skull. Teeth, mouth, front of the face, nose, cheekbones. Again, noticing any places of tension or holding. When we soften, relax. Around to the ears, back of the skull, the eyes, the brow, the temple. What's present here? What are we present to? Forehead, top of the skull, crown of the head. Breathing into the skull, seeing the container of this body, and that which it contains. Expanding the awareness now from the top of the skull, moving down with each breath to the bottoms of the feet, connecting the nervous system, the bloodstream, places of warmth, cold, tingling, vibrating, alive. This body. With each breath, head to feet, feet to head, scanning through. Aware of what's present. Beginning to shift now the lens from the contents and container of this body to see the elemental nature, the earth, the solidity of this body, the earth element, found in the bones and the skeleton, the bone marrow, the organs, the solidity of this body, the earth element. The water element, the liquidity of this body, the blood flow, the synovial fluid, the water throughout, pleasant and unpleasant, the urine and the saliva, blood, the secretions of this body. What seems attractive and unattractive. The air element of this body, the lungs, the space between cells, the wind element of this body, the fire element of this body, warmth, cold, heat, emotion, life force energy, what allows the heart to beat, movement between brain cells, the fire element of this body, electrical impulses. Perhaps aiming the attention toward one specific element, the earth element, the solidity of this body, the water element, the fluidity, the liquidity of this body, the air element, breath, space, wind, movement, the fire element of this body, warmth or cold, this life force energy, the firing of electrical impulses. It's all here. All the wisdom can be found, all the wisdom of the Dharma in this fathom-long body. So the invitation is to take a moment and kind of reflect. What was that experience like for you? Were you able to stay connected? Was there some form of dissociation or distraction? Was there a particular either part of the body or element that you felt more connected to? So just to see for yourself. This elemental nature of the body is part of the first foundation of mindfulness, thought to be the entry point or the foundation of all the other mindfulness techniques. And this contemplation of the body within the body, or the contemplation of breath within the body, I think can be really useful. And, I remember one of my teachers saying, we live a short distance from our bodies very often. Very often we're kind of disconnected to what's kind of happening here. And the coming back to as often as we can, just to kind of be present with what's happening, can be a really useful practice. And then bringing in the elemental. I remember the first time I took part in the elements meditation, and it was, it just was profound. Like, I had never viewed this body in the elemental nature. And it was, profound for me. And I've had it as part of my first foundation practice since then. Yeah. So I'll open up for some questions in a little bit, but I wanted to kind of move through. I think the topic, grasping or clinging, what we grasp or cling to, the Buddha talked about the four attachments. Those are the four things that we attach to that ultimately cause suffering. And just to kind of recap, so, first noble truth is the acknowledgement and the kind of admittance in some way that there is suffering, that we experience suffering. And often, dukkha is the way it's described. Dukkha meaning mental anguish, meaning suffering, meaning kind of off kilter, stress. Sometimes it's translated as impatience, grasping, clinging. The second noble truth from the Buddhist teaching is that that's the cause. The cause of suffering is grasping or clinging. Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, in his book Handbook for Mankind, and maybe I've read it several times, is famous for saying, "Nothing whatsoever should be clung to as me or mine." Don't cling. The grasping is the suffering. It's the rope burn of impermanence. Suffering is the rope burn of impermanence as we grasp or cling to different things that are constantly changing. We cause suffering for ourselves. The third noble truth is that there is an end to suffering that's possible. There is a cessation of suffering that is possible. And I think part of that is this practice that we just did, this kind of seeing maybe the elemental nature of things, being able to kind of penetrate into the present time experience of this body, this breath, this mind. And, what I had talked to in the past about what is what, like seeing the reality of things, as many teachers talk about, including the Buddha. The fourth noble truth being the Eightfold Path, or the path to the end of suffering. So what can be done? And so within this particular focus tonight. I'm going to focus on what it is that we cling to, or the 4 attachments. And you're probably familiar with them. And the question or the inquiry for me is, and perhaps for you, is how do we cling to these things, and how do they cause suffering? So let me just kind of run through them. The first is what's called sensual desire or sensual attachment. And this, at first glance, kind of gives a bad rap, but it's basically like our senses, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, clinging to, we like pleasure. We're addicted to pleasure, and we get attached to sensual pleasure. And in some ways, this is, the major cause of suffering for ourselves, is the ways in which we cling to sensual desire. And it's even the danger is that it feels so good. It's so, we like it. And so we cling to it. And even there's a whole false sense of becoming around sensual desire, around having more, eating more, seeing pleasant, having pleasant experiences. And we get very kind of swayed. And I think so much of our, definitely a capitalist society, but I think just our human nature is to lean toward that which feels good, and in contrast to avoid that which is unpleasant. So this kind of sensual desire really, and it can be everything, sounds and sights, and, what feels good to the touch, and what we eat, and what we see, and what we hear, even where our mind goes, the kind of fantasies or the becoming that can come around that, and then the opposite of, the lack of, when there's a lack of maybe a particular sense desire, there can be suffering there. There also can be suffering around not ever wanting it to go away. I think of love as a good example. Or even simpler, like a good meal, like there is a cessation that happens within a good meal, but the enjoyment of it, and then there's this drive, and part of the drive is instinctual, just like love or sex or, touch. The piece around love is that I feel like there's a way in which love gets kind of misunderstood. And from the Buddhist perspective, it's a sensual desire. Wanting it, coveting it, holding it, keeping it, suffering when it's gone. That's so much of our kind of mental anguish, if you will, is caused around this. Do I have it? Can I get it? Am I close to it? Is it far from me? This kind of sensual love. So it's a real world problem, right? It's so natural to crave and cling to sensual desires or sensual attachments. One of my favorite, teachings from Noah is this kind of retranslation of, it's not that desire is bad or even pleasure is bad, it's the attachment to it, right? So the practice is to have non-attached appreciation when things are pleasant, when we're enjoying a sunset or eating a good meal or being in love, but not clinging to it as if it's never going to change, because it will always change. So that's the first of the things we cling to. So the second is, attachment to opinions, attachment to ideas. From birth, really, from as soon as we can begin to kind of understand opinions and ideas, we are force fed in a sense, and each different, family or culture or environment has a whole different set of ideas. This is a huge amount of suffering. I mean, just look at just how divided this country has been, or the Western world has been, in regards to, like, who's the leader or not the leader, who's good and not good. You know, we get so, I mean, I actually think of Christianity and Islam going, all the way back to before the Crusades. Difference of opinion, different view, every war attached to this kind of right and wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. Even just, in an argument, or, we could have a debate, but there's a self-righteous sense of I'm right. Sometimes we play this kind of superiority, right? Of, I can listen to you, but I know I'm right. I can hear your opinion, but I know you're wrong. And there's that sense of entitlement of that my opinion is right. Now, one of the things I like about the kind of idea of attachment to opinions, that it's not about the moralistic quality of it, it's about the attachment to, and not being able to kind of see outside one's view, the hubris or the arrogance that can come from that can cause a lot of suffering for ourselves and for others. Yeah. So this is the second of the, attachment to opinions or attachment to ideas. I guess I would just like inquire for you, or encourage to just notice, even as I've been talking about this particular issue, is there a view that comes up? This attachment to some kind of a view, even as I was talking. Yeah, but, right? Even the idea that, this is something I get caught in, that Buddhism is the ultimate right opinion, right view. And every other view is wrong. And that is an attachment. And that is can be a cause of suffering, especially when I'm having conversations with my, with my family or friends that think otherwise. So the reflection just about what is our attachment to views, our attachment to opinions, ideas. The third aspect of these attachments that we cling to that cause suffering: rites and rituals. Attachment to rites and rituals. And I think there's a piece here that I wanted to kind of point to about that. So this is the teachings of Buddhadasa Bhikkhu on attachments to rites and rituals. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here, I'll just read this piece. There are beliefs in spirits and celestial beings and sacred trees and all manner of magical objects. This sort of thing is completely irrational from the Buddhist perspective. People just don't think rationally. They simply cling to the established pattern. They have always done it. They've always done it that way, and they just refuse to change. Many people professing to be Buddhist cling to these beliefs as well as what as well, and so have it both ways. And this even includes some who call themselves bhikkhus, disciples of the Buddha. Religious doctrines based on belief in God, angels, and sacred objects are particularly prone to these kinds of views. There is no reason why Buddhists should not be completely free of this sort of thing. So there's this teaching within Buddhism from the Buddha, where the Buddha is talking to, so the Buddha rebelled out of Hinduism full of rites and rituals. The Buddha himself was a Brahmin, so he was born into a Brahmin class. So he could be trained to give these rites and rituals to primarily the wealthy, in order to, for them to receive blessings. And it's still that way in India today. That there's so much money exchanged around, even like, you see the burning ghats in Varanasi, where, this is the holiest place in India, that the wood to build the pyre to burn the body is super expensive. And the rites of the Brahmin class to come and bless the body. So basically, in order to, have your body cremated in the right and most honorable way in India, you have to be wealthy. And in case you weren't aware, like 80% of India is very much not wealthy, right? So, they're similar. I mean, I think we have perhaps more of a working class, and perhaps things are actually changing in India these days, but those systems are still in place. And the Buddha was talking to a group of followers and practitioners, and some were struggling with the idea of kind of Brahmanism, and it's known that the Ganges, or it's supposed that the Ganges is the holiest river on earth, and so dunking, people they'd go and kind of be blessed and dunk their heads in the Ganges. And the Buddha was basically saying, as far as this ritual, if the Ganges really washed people of sin, then everyone would be free from sin. But that's not enough, because everyone that has, dunked themselves in water, or, this, even just the like, even if you think about the Catholic kind of confession, just, so just by confessing, are you absolved of sin? Well, in some view, yes. But what the Buddha kept pointing to is that actually the work is to be done here within our own minds, within our own hearts, that making those changes, those shifts, and seeing clearly, and acting in a virtuous way, or a way that is in the right path as far as the precepts go, non-harming, right? Ahimsa, not killing, not lying, not stealing, being wise with sexuality, being wise with drugs and alcohol, or to not be heedless with both sex and drugs, which of course that doesn't sound fun at all, right? Sex and drugs you're supposed to be heedless with. At least that's the view that I grew up with, seeing, learning. So the rites and rituals also just, I think, extend to not just that kind of Hindu versus Buddhist, because the Buddha himself He didn't want any statues. There was no iconography around the Buddha until hundreds of years after he passed. And the idea was to continually to not grasp to rites and rituals, but to lean into, or to really delve into the practice itself as the path, as the thing to be relied on, or to rely in, and to see for yourself. Of course, it's helpful to have teachers that have gone before. And this is the difference between what's called a Buddha and an Arahant. So the Buddha is someone who, through his own volition or their own volition, freed themselves from suffering, and either discovered or rediscovered the path, depending on, which Buddha. And then an Arahant is like someone like the Dalai Lama, or someone like Thich Nhat Hanh, or someone who, based on the teachings that have already been established, has continued, or like Ajahn Chah, or someone who has become free from certain, free from suffering based on the teachings that have already been established. So I was in India. I was in a place called Bodh Gaya, India, which is where the tree that the Buddha sat under to become enlightened was. And Bodh Gaya is like Buddhism. It's like the Disneyland of Buddhism, right? There's like all of these different temples, and like every type, every facet of Buddhism is represented there. And people are doing tours and singing chants, and monks are chanting and meditating, and people are counting beads and bowing 1,000 times, and there's all of these things, candles and incense, and there's just so much happening all the time, and groups are coming through. It's like the Mecca of Buddhism. And I spent probably, let's see, maybe a week and a half there. When I stayed at a monastery, and my practice was to go each day and walk to the area around the tree, and then meditate, and do some walking and meditation, and then I would I would walk around the grounds and just observe, and talk to some people too, but just observe all of the different ways in which these kind of rituals that people take into account. And I found it, in some ways, somewhat humorous, right? Because the Buddha was like, clinging to lighting a candle and incense is not going to get you free from suffering. It might be pleasant. It makes us feel good. It's kind of like back to the sensual attachment. It feels good when we light a candle or an incense, because we feel like we're, able to get into the vibe, or the, whatever it is for different people. But yeah, I would talk to different people about, all the different ways. Like there was one person, they were, counting, thousands of beads each day, and that was their practice. And another person was like, they had to do 108 full body prostrations, and, each day, and all of these different kind of ritualistic aspects to, devotion. But it's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha didn't even want people to bow before him. That was never, like, all this kind of 3 bows came later. When I was living in a monastery in Thailand, at Wat Pah Nanachat, which was, it's like the Western monastery in Thailand, and it was really the first time that I had been in such this is the monastery of Ajahn Chah, right? And every time you walked into a room, you had to bow 3 times. Anytime that a monk that was an elder walked by you, you had to bow, you had to, down on your knees and bow. You had to, there was this bowing in, bowing out. There was so much bowing, and I was so resistant to it. That it started to get to be kind of, because I kind of knew this, like this can't be, this isn't what the Buddha taught. This is some later adaptation, uh, uh, some later kind of adaptation of patriarchy and hierarchical structures, right? And I'd started to get really like almost left, you know what I mean? And I was talking with Ajahn Pasano, and he was like, yeah, he's from Canada, and he's an elderly monk, and he's been around for a long time. And he was like, yeah, no, I get it. Westerners tend to have more problems with this bowing business than anyone else. But, see it. And so he gave me this kind of practice is see it as a practice in reducing your ego. That every time you bow, every time you're paying homage, that you're like taking a little chink off the ego structure that keeps you separate from others. And I took that on, and actually it was very useful for me to kind of reframe it that way. And we're Against the Stream, we're not big on bowing, and we may do it on occasion to a Buddha statue or an elder monk or something like that. But basically, because of this idea, because to over ritualize the bowing, which I found in Thailand, like people will bow all the time, everywhere, but not meditate for 5 minutes. Not actually sit down and meditate for 5 minutes, or they'll burn a candle, and it becomes very like, it's like going to the Catholic Church and lighting a candle. Just some of those, like when that people are more reliant on the ritual than on the practice or on the teaching. So there's that. The third aspect of attachment, which causes suffering, clinging to rites and rituals. And then the fourth is the ideas of selfhood. So this kind of clinging to the idea of me and mine, And I wanted to read just a little piece about, this is called the Sutra on Totality by the Buddha. It's from the Samyutta Nikaya. The Sutra on Totality. Monks, I will teach you the totality of life. Listen and attend carefully. I will speak. What, monks, is totality? It is just the eye with the objects of sight, the ear with the objects of hearing, the nose with the objects of smell, the body with the objects of touch, the mind with the objects of cognition. This, monks, is called totality. Now, if anyone were to say, aside from this explanation of totality, I will preach another totality, that person would be speaking empty words and being questioned, and if questioned, would not be able to answer. Why is this? Because the person is talking about something outside of possible knowledge. The Sutra of Totality. The totality of things is sometimes the way it's described. So what does this mean? This idea of soul, or this idea of possessing this body versus this body just being a process. Well, this is the teaching of the Buddha. This is what the body-centered practice was about, to kind of break the enchantment of me and mine. And part of this teaching is also pointing to, what's called anatta, right? Which is not self, which I think I've talked about before. But this selfhood, the ideas of selfhood of, this is my body, this is, my life, and I need to become something, someone in this life in order to be okay. That we can get caught in tons of suffering around this idea of selfhood. Now, this doesn't mean, I think this is more like when we get caught in our personality, like, this is who I am, you know, this is just who I am. Like, I'm just an angry person. This is just who I am. Or I'm just anytime we're like, this is who I am, we can be caught in a self view, which is locked, and it doesn't allow for shift. It doesn't allow for movement. And so the more that we kind of bounce up against um, anicca, this kind of idea of change or impermanence, the more suffering we can experience. So I would invite you to, just reflect upon these things, right? So in what ways does kind of attachment to sense pleasure cause suffering? And how can we have freedom from this sense of attachment, um, non-attached appreciation, enjoying life, but not clinging to having it like it has to be pleasant all the time, because it's not, and we know that, but we don't like it, right? So attachment to opinions and ideas. So again, not that it's not good to have opinions and it's not good to debate. I think it is good. And are we so attached that we're not able to see another person's view? Are we demonizing others for having a different opinion? I think we've seen a lot of this, right? And all of these things, of course, I am totally subject to. I get caught in, not enlightened yet. Um, but I think I've told you guys before about attachment to opinion, where when I was in grad school, I part of my own conditioning around the way I was taught, and so some of the early childhood experiences I had with education, I felt like I had to prove myself all the time. And when I was in grad school, if I had a differing opinion than anyone, I would share it. As just a matter. It also was probably some of my white privilege. I felt like I had to speak up all the time. Part of my male privilege. I felt like I had to, have my voice be heard. These were layers of privilege that I wasn't really aware to. But I was able to see, I have some attachment to opinions and ideas, and quality of selfhood. And some of it was out of wounding, out of wounding from my own kind of upbringing, where I had to be right, or I had to share my opinion, or, there was these kind of ways in which I was really still blind, to that. There was some of my shadow. And really turning toward like having to use this as a practice of like, okay, like I would wait and I would not, and I was actually, I also want to say I was probably in this grad program, I was studying East-West psychology, one of the most diverse groups of people I've probably ever spent 3 years with. I mean, the most diverse. And yeah, so I started to kind of really notice and become more aware of my own white privilege and my own kind of need to have my voice be heard. And I started to hold back. I started to kind of pause and not have to raise my hand every time that I disagreed with somebody, and watch my ego, watch the kind of, no, I got to share this, I'm right. Watch the struggle that I felt. And even like at some point I felt like I was oppressing myself. Like there was this like, you're oppressing yourself because, they're just whatever the kind of ego would come up with. So it was really a great practice to just kind of begin to see how I can be attached to my own opinions and ideas and my own sense of selfhood, and how that was still kind of playing out, years into practice. And it still plays out in some ways. Some ways I'm awake to, some ways I'm not awake to. But I'm open to being awake. And I think that's the ultimate goal here. Like, what can we become awake to that yesterday we were asleep to? What about our own grasping? What about our what ideas are we clinging to that no longer serve us? In what ways do we cause suffering for ourselves based on sensual attachment, based on attachment to opinions and views, based on clinging to certain rites and rituals, based on ideas of kind of selfhood or me and mine. Yeah. So that's what I hope for you, and I think that's that's what the Buddha is talking about. In these are the four things that we cling to. So pay attention to them, wake up to them, and ultimately, kind of let go. Right. If you this famous quote from Ajahn Chah: if you want a little happiness, let go a little. If you want a lot of happiness, let go a lot. If you want complete freedom from suffering and happiness, let go completely. Right. This is about letting go of clinging. That nothing whatsoever should be clung to as me or mine. All right. So open for some questions or comments, thoughts. What you guys got going on? Any clarity? Which maybe I can provide, maybe I can't. I'm not sure. Oh, you can like raise your hand or just speak out. Or we'll just end. Karen, go ahead. I love that you actually raise your hand instead of the little blue hand, but you can, it's totally fine.
I don't know how to do the blue hand. I don't see a hand raising feature on my screen.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about it.
But that aside, you did explain no self, and I have to say I'm still not there. So if you could talk a little more about that.
Okay. The simplest way that I like to talk about this idea of no fixed and permanent self is really just to say that in seeing impermanence and turning the idea of impermanence, we can all agree on impermanence, yeah, that nothing lasts, everything is in constant flux, right? Sun is rising, earth is spinning, seasons are changing, we're slowly dying every breath. We're living every breath, but we're dying every breath too, right? So there's this kind of constant flux. That this body and who we are is also subject to that. There is no fixed or permanent Jason. That I am really just like this body itself. I am a combination of parts that have been kind of thrown together and that will live for a period of time as long as these elements are stay together, and eventually they'll break apart. And then the question that some people say is, what's left over? So from the Buddhist perspective, the only thing that's left over is the momentum of karma. So call it an energy that is very similar to, let's say our water cycle. Water doesn't leave the earth. It's rising. It's it's going in the earth. It's going in the snow. It's going to lakes, into the ocean, up to the sky. It just kind of cycles through. The same thing happens with our karmic momentum. And so there's that. There's all that, right? But
what happens if I say this is my house or my pet dog?
Yeah.
As long as I understand that it won't always be my house, then I'm okay.
Yeah, in essence, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not about okay necessarily. See, the me and mine, when we cling to things as me or mine, or even like this body is my body, right? The there's a dissonance that happens that causes a layer of suffering. So this is what's being kind of talked about. And yes, ultimately it's like, yeah, I know that things that I have bought or that I own, they're not me. And they'll be mine but I'm not taking it with me, right? The other way to really just think about this idea of not self is really that sutra of totality, is that all that there is our senses. And we have some ego identification even to our senses as being, my eyes or my ears. We have ego identification with our feelings. This is my feeling. Is it? Or is it just a feeling that has arisen out of causes and conditions and will fade away, and that I will feel sad one day and you'll feel sad a different day, and that it's actually just this energy of emotion that doesn't have anything to do with me and mine. There's certain causes and conditions that may cause it to come up, that may bring it up, but it's ultimately not me. So this is one of another way to kind of think about it. I will go into this a little bit more. I'll talk about it next week. I'll break it down using the aggregates as a teaching of not self next week. I will do that because it's both complicated, Karen, and it's not complicated. It's both a big deal and it's totally not a big deal, because it's like, karma exists whether you believe it or not. We not self exists whether we see it clearly or not. Whether we suffer because of it is that thing that you're saying. Like if I recognize that even though I live in a house, I may own it now, it's not forever mine. It's not my possession. I'm not it. It's not me. Right. So as long as we can kind of have some of that separation is helpful. But I'll explain it a little bit more in more detail next week. Michael.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Thanks, Karen, too. In Ajahn Amaro's book, I think the most significant thing for me that I read, because, going through these attachments, I've been bogged down in them for a lot of time in my life, and I still struggle with them as well. And the part in the book was when he talked about fixed views, and he talked about not clinging to fixed views. That has stayed with me since I read that book. I've read a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, and because I'm fascinated by it and interested and enthusiastic and excited, all of that stuff. But that more than anything stuck out to me because I'm super opinionated. And then, getting into the first of the 4 attachments, like the sense objects or sense desires. That's why I came to Dharma in the first place in Refuge Recovery. Because I thought that you could achieve lasting happiness through that and bypass feelings, and learned that that's not possible. It's fleeting, it's temporary, and it's hollow. And it doesn't give you relief. It just brings a lot of suffering. And I love the meditation too, because I was able to stay with the guidance. And, I have been an EMT before and studied anatomy. Yeah. So I could, as you're going, I can see it in the textbook or like see it in my mind. And I found comfort in that. And I wasn't trying to contest or argue with or challenged the meditation, just like went with it and felt good the entire time. And I read this discourse from the Middle Event Discourse of the Buddha, the root of all things. And it was a pretty long, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but he went through the elements in it.
Yeah.
And I just, instead of like, I feel like because of Buddhism and because of, mindfulness of the body, I feel more attached to earth, water, fire, air, the solid ground, more so now than ever, because, born of it and part of it. And it's just, when you're doing that meditation, like all of that manifests and becomes present in my mind, like where I never felt the interconnectivity or the interdependence of it before. Like there was a disconnect, like if I was in front of a fire, that's my fire. I set that fire. That's the fire that, we're having at the beach to have a couple beers by, or I don't see it that way anymore. It's a big shift. And I really appreciate the meditation tonight. And when we went through the 4 attachments, it really brought the breakthrough back. And then one more thing, and I've gone on too long, just like I always do. You're talking about bowing, and you're talking about maybe the ritualistic side of Buddhism that got added further on down the line. I listen to Ajahn Amaro's podcast a lot on Spotify. And, when they do the Pali chant to, homage to the Triple Gem, like when they do all that, like, I don't know. I don't see it as ritualistic. I see it as grateful, like that's the impression I'm getting. And
Yeah.
I've even started doing it, when I'm meditating on my own, and before I meditate.
Yeah.
And I guess at the end of the day, it's just, with all of this stuff, it just constantly challenges my mind and opens it up. And I feel less of an adherence to fixed views. And I have more of an open mind and more of a receptivity than I've ever had before. That's a very counterinstinctual and counterintuitive and a big departure from the backpacks I brought to Refuge Recovery and Dharma. Like,
Right.
it's just, there's a lot of gratitude, and then there's a lot of learning, and then like open-mindedness and not contesting it all, like being open to a different view. That's all. Thanks.
So
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
Yeah.
your sharing, Michael. I really benefit from it, so thank you.
No, Karen, thank you for sharing too, like the generosity of your share and everybody sharing the saga.
And I want to just say that, I actually find the chanting to be, it's a meditation. I feel like it's useful. I feel like it's very similar to the metta practice, this kind of repeated phrase. And so chanting can be beautiful and amazing. And it actually was around at the time of the Buddha, but it's basically why we have so it's been part of the monastic code for thousands of years. I find that to be a little bit different than some of the other rites and rituals, but I appreciate what you're saying. And we do need to end. The time is up. Thank you for your time, for your attendance, for your practice. Obviously against the stream, we're always appreciate any donations that you can make to, help to sustain our brick and mortar, but also, we pay for the website, and then we're paying for Zoom, and, all these different kind of things that are helping us to get the message out and pay for these different subscriptions to all these online venues now. And so next week I'll go into the ideas of selfhood a little bit more, and we'll try to break that down in as uncomplicated a way as possible. So all of the goodness of our practice, may all of the goodness be dedicated to the freedom from suffering for all beings everywhere. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free from suffering.